What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast. Back one day after the Bills clinched the AFC East with a 35-10 win over the San Francisco 49ers. The rewatch has happened, so I'll have some more thoughts on the Bills' performance yesterday. And, of course, we'll get into some things that we heard from Sean and Joe Brady. Bobby Babich is talking to the media now. Ryan Talbot, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And this new format that I wanted to kind of roll out over the last couple of weeks, it's a fun one. We're including some insiders. So we have Kyle, who's waiting in the green room. We're going to bring him in as the main event here in a couple of minutes. But what we're going to do is it's three big questions. So I throw a question to Ryan Talbot. We discuss. Ryan brings it back to me. We discuss. Then we bring on Kyle to talk about his question. You can become an insider right now by texting 716-528-6727. That'll give you a 2-week free trial if you start today, and then it's $3.99 a month after that. And Shout is brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. Ready to serve fan favorites, Tops has you covered this season. Let them do the cooking and you'll be the MVP. Visit shop.topsmarkets.com and elevate your food game with great selection of custom cakes, desserts, pizzas, sandwiches, fresh fruit, cheese trays, fried chicken, and so much more. Save time and easily shop with the convenience of no-fee pickup on all your game day deals. There are no service fees, no tips, just the best deals in town. Score great deals in time for kickoff. Ryan, how are you? Did you get some sleep last night or not really?
About 3 hours of sleep. I definitely could go for some more. It's going to be an early bedtime for me tonight.
Shout out to my wife who did all the morning stuff with the kids, took them to school, let me sleep in. She is the real MVP. She's up actually making dinner too right now. I don't know where I'd be without her. She's awesome. So my big question, taking the temperature of the football community after last night's Bills game, the one big question that I keep coming back to is it feels like everybody's starting to believe in the hype around this Bills team, right? Like it's been week after week after week, big time performance after big time performance, 7 straight wins. They haven't lost since they traded for Amari Cooper. And as you look ahead to, the playoff push, and then once they get into the playoffs, I'm wondering, is this collection of talent, Sean McDermott in year 8, Joe Brady as OC, Bobby Babich as DC, any way you want to take it, is this the best chance that Josh Allen has had to win a Super Bowl with the way the Bills are currently constructed?
Whew, that's a great question. You really have to sit there and you have to go back and remember the year that they lost to Kansas City with the 13 seconds. That would be the one team I would put up against this, because that's the one squad that got hot at the right time, in my opinion. They were on a heater in the playoffs. They ended the regular season strong. The health was great that year as well. So that's going to be the true test. But if you were to ask me right now, not knowing how this season is going to play out, I would probably say yes, this is the best chance that he's had to win a Super Bowl, because you can compare the rosters in terms of that year or even the last few years to what the Bills have now. And I would say that the offensive line has never been better for Josh Allen than it is this year. I would say that from top to bottom, the pass catchers are better with this squad than that squad that was really good a few years back. Stephon Diggs in his prime, Gabe Davis, everyone will always remember that playoff performance against the Chiefs and what he could do. But when you look at Amari Cooper still getting acclimated to this team, Khalil Shakir and the dominance that he has displayed for this team in the slot, knowing what you have in Keon Coleman and that he's just scratching the surface on that as a player, continuing to bring along Curtis Samuel, and the list goes on at tight ends. Offensively, I think they're in a better spot. Defensively, too, it really does seem like they're being able to get more pressure from their front four at times. And then we know that the back end of this defense is still a strength. What do you think?
I'm going to say yes, and for multiple reasons. It's hard to push against what you're talking about, because if you go back to that offensive performance, Josh Allen specifically, I don't think there was a 2-game period in his career where he was on more of a heater than he was in that playoffs. And you wonder if they get past that 13 seconds game and they go on to host the Bengals, and who knows what happens in the Super Bowl, if he can't just do enough himself with the heater that he was on to win that game. But the big difference for me with this iteration is, and Jason brings it up on YouTube here, shout out to him. He says it's the best coach team. And I think that's so true, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. Like, I love Leslie Frazier. I think getting a chance to cover him for 5 seasons there when I first got to the league, an older, experienced coach that I feel like was so open to share so many different things about how the game is played, and his experience in the game was great. But I just felt like they had reached their ceiling with how good this defense could be under Frazier. And what we've seen now under Babbage is, first of all, it's been the evolution of this defense. It went from the really laid-back approach of Frazier, the sit back and bend but don't break, to a little bit more of an aggressive style under Sean McDermott. What was my big criticism last year with McDermott calling the plays? He needs to be the CEO. He needs to be the guy running the team. So to have your both hands fully in on the defense, I don't feel like allowed him to be what I think they need him to be as a head coach. And I think, he talked about the preparation going into that Kansas City Chiefs game. And when they hit that 4th and 2 play, he knew before they even got to that moment that they were going to go in that situation. And to me, if he's worried in those moments about, what will this mean for the defense? What will this mean for this other part of the game? You have to be fully invested in your one job that you have to do and have trust in the guys that you've empowered in their roles. I think Brady's doing a good job. I think Babbage is doing a good job. And here's another big piece. This team has been the best adjustments team that Sean McDermott has ever coached. I'm talking about, you come out, things don't work. We even saw it yesterday, right? Like the offense on the first 2 possessions, they almost went 3 and out on that second drive, if not for the pass interference call. But Joe Brady figures it out. He gets out of shotgun. He leans more heavily into under center. They get the run game going. They get some of the pass stuff going. They lean heavily into the duo run over and over again. He spammed it all game long, and the Bills players after the game were laughing about it because they're like, the 49ers knew what we were running, and over again, it's almost like they didn't even want to play against them. So I think that they can play right-handed, left-handed, and sometimes with both hands behind their back. Sometimes the offense isn't going to be able to figure it out, and you need your defense to come up and make some big-time plays. They've done it. They did it last night in a big spot. And it felt early in that game, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, if you didn't feel this way. It felt like the 49ers were early putting up their last stand, right? Christian McCaffrey was running really well. I thought they were blocking. They had a couple of good defensive possessions before the penalty, 7 or 8 straight plays where I thought, okay, maybe this is going to be a heavyweight fight, the fight that we thought it was going to be when the schedule came out. So that to me was, okay, the way the Bills completely stifled and then trampled the 49ers, I don't think you can undersell what that means in that spot in the snow game when we're a year removed from the narrative being the Bills can't win in the elements.
Yeah, 49ers had, that desperation factor, and they can still win their division. Their division is a mess. On a week-to-week basis, you don't know what you're getting out of Seattle, Arizona, or the Rams. So they could still sneak into the playoffs and get hot at the right time and make a run. But you're right. It was a final stand of sorts. I remember the one big pop that they had on James Cook on one play, and some of the 3-and-outs and the way that they were running the ball so effectively. It's just that, once the Bills got up to speed, once they found their footing, literally, they were able to just out-talent that team. They were the more physical team, obviously the healthier team by far, too, and that certainly factored into it. So, I agree with what you're saying about the talent of this roster, the talent of this coaching staff, and that could be, the coaching staff, which we never seem to really talk about in terms of what's that final push to get your roster to the Super Bowl. The coaching staff might be the reason why, if this is the year, that they get to that ultimate goal.
The other part of this is like the other contenders in the conference, right? Like if we were talking about like prime Kansas City Chiefs, Travis Kelce still just dominating the league, Tyreek Hill in the first iteration, and then, Rashee Rice last year, the Chiefs don't feel like the same team, right? So that's a part of it. We saw a Baltimore team exposed to a degree yesterday at home, hosting a Philadelphia Eagles team that let's not say anything else other than that is a team that's one of the top contenders now at this stage of the season. But that wasn't the story on this Eagles team 2 months ago. A lot of people were calling for Sirianni's job early in the season. And so you figure Baltimore in December or late November hosting that game, finds a way to win it. And I know it ended up being a 3 or 4 point game there at the end. It wasn't that close. I mean, the Eagles dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And this was the big question that I had when the calendar turns to December for Baltimore. Is Derrick Henry going to start to show the tread on the tires? They've used him quite a bit over the course of the season, and it makes sense. I mean, he's on pace to like put up absolutely unbelievable numbers, but I just don't know if Baltimore is the contender that they were in September and October, which is the narrative on this team going back 4, 5, 6 seasons. I think the Chargers have some juice. Pittsburgh came out and made a statement, going out and knocking out the Bengals, who were playing at full strength offensively with their season on the line. I felt like the way the Steelers played and Russell Wilson looking as good as, and I've been very critical of Russell Wilson, and that move to start him and not go with Justin Fields, everything's coming up roses for Mike Tomlin right now in Pittsburgh. So what do you make of the landscape in the AFC, and do you feel like this is the most beatable crop of contenders in the AFC compared to previous seasons?
I think that's fair to say. And you mentioned Pittsburgh, and that's the ultimate coaching matters point. Mike Tomlin has never been had a team under 500. It's continued again this year. A lot of people were writing off that squad, myself included. I didn't think there was much left in the gas tank for Russell Wilson. I thought that Justin Fields, despite a lot of flaws in his game, maybe would bring more to that team. And lo and behold, that moon ball just works to perfection in Pittsburgh. Wilson throwing it up and Pickens coming down with the ball, getting other guys, Kelvin Austin III, involved. Skoranek, they have the run game, a really good 1-2 punch, and that defense is as legitimate as ever there too. So they are definitely more viable than I thought even a month ago. Baltimore is so frustrating to watch because you saw what they did to the Bills in that game. I know the Bills are shorthanded, missing a few people, but they really punched Buffalo in the mouth, and minus one little stint where the Bills almost got back into it with the whole momentum swing. You saw a really strong performance in all three phases of that game for Baltimore. But then you watched the game yesterday, and as brilliant as Lamar Jackson is at times, those missed throws that he had, some really brutal ones. Footwork was atrocious on one where he had an easy first down. He threw it into the turf at the receiver's feet. Some other errant passes that he overshot to Nelson Aguilar and other weapons there. Derrick Henry started out strong. I believe he had over 100 yards again in that game, but toward the end, he wasn't looking as strong in terms of the run game. Even when he caught a ball, you have Cooper DeJean come in and literally, two-leg takedown on this guy immediately, flexing over this legendary running back. So I do have some issues there with that team, with that squad. Come January, they were able to beat Houston last year in the playoffs, but once again, in a meaningful game, they don't score enough points offensively. The defense did enough to win that. So I have questions on them. Chiefs, I'm not sure are a legitimate threat. I know, it's going to be one of those things where you eat crow if they win the Super Bowl again and it all comes together for them, but this is definitely the weakest they have looked. That doesn't mean they can't win it all and get to the Super Bowl, but yeah, I think there is a clear path, or a clearer path this year than maybe in previous years, especially when you look at teams like the Bengals, who have been, a thorn in the Buffalo side, most likely not being in the playoffs this year.
I mentioned earlier in the show that you could become a Shout Buffalo Bills insider by texting 716-528-6727. The Shout text line is brought to you by Carrie C. Byer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litro, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give them a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litrolaw.com. All right, Ryan, giving you some time. Hit me with your big question.
Yeah, I can't believe where I'm getting this question from today, Matt, but I'm going to give a shout out to Rachel Bush, of all people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if you saw this on X or Twitter today. But given a lot of love to Buffalo today for what they've done, winning the division again. And she had a tweet that said, "Things have been 100% confirmed to me this year. Simplicity is better. Just play ball. I don't know why everyone isn't taking notes from Buffalo on this. Hard work and camaraderie beats talent any day. Lastly, what the guys started building 8 years ago in Buffalo can't be replicated." So I guess my question is, what is your belief on the hard work and camaraderie beats talent every day? Is this a matter of a Buffalo team? I guess we kind of already talked about it in terms of their talent level. I think this is just as talented as any other team out there. But how much does the camaraderie, the fact that a lot of these guys have been around each other a lot of the newer faces have come from winning programs in college. I guess I'm going to go to her question. Does hard work and camaraderie really beat out talent every day?
I don't know if I'd say it beats it out every day, because you could be a really kumbaya type of operation and just not have enough talent to compete. Like, don't get it twisted. The Bills have arguably the best player on the planet. When it comes down to every part of the game, the ceiling of his game, the floor of his game, and Josh Allen. Like, I know Patrick Mahomes has the rings, but if I'm talking about in a game where you need somebody to make a play, he's right there in the conversation with Mahomes for me. And it's been that way for a while. I mean, probably since 13 seconds. So when you have that, of course, it's good to have, you need all of the other stuff to Rachel's point, but I don't think that the Bills are what they are without Josh Allen. And to me, I think that's the best case that can be made for him to be the MVP of the league this season. I think the Philadelphia Eagles have had a ton of iterations of that offense, of that team, that has been a Super Bowl caliber team. I mean, even going back to Carson Wentz, when they went and won a Super Bowl, right? When he went out and Nick Foles took over, there's been so many different versions of what they've built there that have been amongst the tops of the league. What Josh Allen has done over the course of his 7-year career here, it's never been duplicated in Buffalo. I mean, there's never been a player that has meant this much to a singular team. And I think that, like, if you ask Jordan Poyer, he would say the same thing. Now, when it comes to what she's talking about with guys wanting to play with each other, for each other, Mac Hollins to me is like the prototypical player that embodies what that could potentially mean. Like, when you bring in a guy like that, who is like an afterthought back a couple months ago when they were doing free agency, and you get to minicamp, and you're not even in training camp. So you just have met this guy for a couple weeks of meetings. And by the end of it, you're watching the offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, walking around practice walkthroughs barefoot. Like, that's the kind of impact where it's more than just, hey, this is a good guy, this is a leader, I want to follow his lead. It's more about, like, this is somebody that I now consider a friend. And, like, to me, that was always the pushback on Diggs, is that, like, for as much as he was revered in the locker room by a lot of players. I mean, when you're that good for that long and you are a good teammate in the way that you can be it, like, you're going to be a popular guy. But when it creates this extra layer of stress, it's such a stressful thing to try to win a Super Bowl and try to stay consistently good over the course of 17 weeks and then a 5-week stretch to the Super Bowl, that any little, like, issue that permeates within a group can fester and then can become a bigger problem. And I think that's what happened with the previous iterations of this team, even with the leadership of guys like Tre'Davious White and Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and Mitch Morse. Those guys all were there, and the problem still persisted. So now you look on all sides of the ball, you see a Sean McDermott that's never been calmer, cool, collected. I tried to ask him about it today. He wanted no part of that question, so I'll have to be doing a little bit more due diligence with the players this week. But there just seems to be a level of relaxation within the organization from top to bottom that exists when you have what Rachel's talking about.
I agree. You look at this roster, and shout out to NBC Sports last night, pointing out the fact that the Bills lost 6 captains from last year to this year, and there's still enough glue guys on this roster from those previous rosters and teams led by Josh Allen. You throw in Dawson Knox, the bookends at tackle, the second, Taron Johnson, the secondary. They have enough of those previous guys to help teach the new players, whether it's free agents or rookies, the standard, the expectations. And I hate to use the word vibes, but just the overall locker room from training camp on this season has been that much more relaxed. And some of that is the players they brought in. We talked back at training camp about how much this coaching staff loved Matt Collins. And it was easy to see. It was apparent. We thought he was going to have a big role, and he was having a big role before they traded for Amari Cooper, before they gave Keon Coleman some more run early as the season went on here early in the year. But he has meant so much to this team. You bring in players with talent, and some of these guys haven't necessarily had a huge role on offense or defense that they've brought in. A Curtis Samuel injuries have factored into that, but he's stepped up the last few weeks. That's a guy that is a selfless player, team first guy. And he just wanted to win. He had been on losing teams his entire career, Carolina and Washington. And, joining a team like this really matters to a guy like that. They just seem to have their finger on the pulse of what are the right guys to bring in fit wise. And some of them leave you scratching your head. Like when Casey Tuhill made this roster back in late August, early September, I was sitting there saying, I don't know. I don't get it. But he's been, he's a locker room guy. He's a good guy for this team. And he's actually made some decent plays on the field as part of that rotation. So they know what they're looking for. And then when you throw in the coaching staff, the way that they bring these players along, the talent's there. But the hard work is mixed in. They don't let guys rest on their laurels. They don't. They make sure to remind them that you need to do the hard work part of it, because when you look at the teams that have floundered in this division this year, the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins, there's a boatload of talent on both of those teams, but maybe it's just they're not getting coached up well enough, and maybe they're not putting in that hard work. And I don't know that for sure, but there's got to be a reason why these teams that were supposed to knock off the Bills this year and the Jets, that the Super Bowl roster and window, why they haven't come close to those expectations. Whereas in Buffalo, with this coaching staff, with this front office that has been here since, for the most part, since 2017, there's been some turnover there, both in the front office and the coaching staff with coordinators and whatnot. But with everything, you put it all together, there is something to be said about that camaraderie and the fact that they're able to get the talent to work so hard.
Great stuff. Good question. Good find. We're going to go to the bullpen at this point. I'm going to bring in Kyle, one of our insiders. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming on. So how long have you been an insider?
Oh, boy. I think I joined maybe only a couple weeks after you guys started it. I've been listening to the podcast for a while now, and as soon as I saw that was an option, I was like, man, I can't get enough Matt and Ryan in my life. And as soon as I started getting the text on my phone, I was like, yeah, let's go.
I gotta have you talk to my wife, because I haven't heard her say that in years. Maybe Ryan, but not me. So what do you like about it?
I get Bills news before anybody else, and that's a credit to you guys and the great work that you do. Sometimes the insights that you guys provide in the text line is stuff that I wouldn't even considered, or different points of view that I think really add to my fandom. So just, it's one of my favorite subscriptions, and one of the things that, I look forward to, every game day, getting all the information stuff from you guys. It's one of the best parts about, being a Shout insider.
Dude, that's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if you want to become an insider, text 716-528-6727. Come join the party. Me and Ryan are always hanging out on the text line. All right, Kyle. So we picked your question this week. Thought it was a good one. So take us through it. We'll answer, and then we'll get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So my big question for this week is, what is the most important thing that the Bills need to do to stay the course and make it to the Super Bowl?
Ooh. I hate to use the health answer, but I really, that's the first thing that popped into my head. The last few years, when the Bills have been eliminated in the postseason, you look at those inactive lists and the talented players that weren't suited up. The guys that did play and were at less than 100%, Rasul Douglas comes to mind. I really feel like health has to factor in, and, knock on wood. I don't want anyone to think I'm jinxing this team. I had someone in the insiders yesterday based on something I wrote, but like, watch what, don't say something like that. And it was nothing superstitious or anything like that, but they're trending in the right direction. They've been banged up this year, but they're getting so many guys back now at the right time. And these last 5+ games are still very meaningful in terms of that 1 seed. But what's going to be more meaningful to them is, regardless of what seed they finish as, if they go in fully healthy, there's not a roster in the AFC or NFC where I don't think the Bills can go in and beat that team any given Saturday, Sunday, depending on when that game is getting played, because that's how good this talent and depth is from top to bottom. So you get back a Matt Milano, Dwayne Carter's getting close to returning, Keon Coleman. You expect Dalton Kincaid back sooner rather than later based on Sean McDermott in the press, so they're saying they're all making, strides in their recovery. So that to me is the one thing that must happen. They must be healthy come playoff time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Obviously, health being the most important factor. But for me, I think the Bills should use the situation as an opportunity to consistently look for ways to reinvent themselves. And I think one of the things that we've been so complimentary, even on this episode specifically, has been their ability to throw teams off with how many different ways they can win games, right? And so I think, maybe lean a little bit more heavily into, the spread, like what we saw early in Josh's career. Does Joe Brady have that in his bag to be able to kind of unlock some up-tempo stuff? We haven't seen a ton of that from the Bills, but if you get into a game and you need to switch things up, to me in the playoffs, the best way to put defenses off balance is to go from drive to drive and be able to find a different identity through all those pieces. And it's ironic in a lot of ways because we spent all of these years talking about what is the Bills' identity on offense? Like, what are they truly? Where in the end, I think what's going to get them over the hump is the ability to almost become multi-dimensional when it comes to their identity, being able to play in different ways. I don't want to say they've mastered it because, there's going to be some teams that they potentially play in the playoffs. I mean, the Steelers are really tough against the run. I think a really healthy Chiefs defense will give you challenges in the run game as well. But they've been really good in the run game, and they have all three backs that have had really important roles throughout the season. But we haven't ever really seen them. Josh Allen goes back into, shotgun, line everybody up out wide consistently, play after play, and just see if you can't torch a team. And, you can run a lot of different stuff. It doesn't have to they can play too high. You can still do some underneath stuff. They love the quick screen game. Middle of the field, I think there's opportunity, especially when teams play zone. I just think that that's what you can do over the next 5 weeks is where can we unlock a different part of this offense specifically so that if we are banging our heads against the wall in a tough game in the playoffs, we'll have other answers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that the offense this year to me has been so much more exciting to watch because, even though one thing that we've seen a lot this year is that, the consistency of running the ball on first down, right? We keep seeing the Bills do that over and over again. To me, that the fact that they were being more efficient with running the ball and, really committing to that, but at the same time, it's not necessarily that it's a trend that's going to be an issue. It's more so that, when we have James Cook, when you have Ray Davis, when you have, Ty Johnson, all three of those backs, like Matt was saying, all three of those guys working in tandem, they each have certain roles that they kind of fill in, but they can do so many different things. And I think that efficiency and that versatility that they have back there is great. And also just the offensive line this year. Alec Anderson, last year that was even during the game, this was probably the first game I've really seen him pop off and just I noticed him on the field in that jumbo tight end, and that to me was just something that I don't think I've really seen that sort of, different type of just efficiency, I guess is the best way to say it. So yeah, I think for me, it's, being multiple on offense. It's, that aggressive style of defense that Matt was talking about earlier too, with, being able to attack the ball and, having all these different playmakers. I really think that, that this team does feel different, but, there's so many parts that I think just maintaining one thing, it's not going to be enough to get you to the Super Bowl. It's got to be balancing a bunch of things and, on even a game by game basis, figuring out which of those things are more important than the others.
Yeah, completely well said. It did feel like the last few years come playoff time, they had to lean on Josh Allen, doing Josh Allen things, being a Superman of sorts. And at times it worked. It got them beyond the wild card round, although there were some struggles against teams like Miami, for instance, with Skylar Thompson that year. There were some scary moments where this doesn't feel like that at all on the offensive side of the ball. They might not get off to a great start running some games, but they're not going to go away from it because they know the talent that James Cook has, that Ray Davis has. Ty Johnson, too, they love him as that third down back. The O-line from top to bottom has never been better, so Allen is more protected. I know the snow certainly factored into protecting Allen a little bit yesterday, but the Bills got a lot of hits on Brock Purdy, and whereas the 49ers had one QB hit and no sacks on Josh Allen, the O-line deserves a lot of credit for that. Even if sometimes it was a footing issue, there's a lot of times the O-line held up and protected well. And there's just so many other weapons in this passing game. No egos. Everyone's just happy for whoever steps up any given Sunday or any given day, where you feel good about that side of the ball. And this defense, they're still gelling, in my opinion, and they're already playing at such a great level. You're getting guys mixed back in, like a Matt Milano. I feel like Daquan Jones might slowly be showing some signs of life. I felt the D tackle position wasn't great yesterday, but upon some of the rewatch, he was the one defensive tackle that did step up a few times and make some plays for that unit. You talk about the back end. Hamlin's looking more like he did a few seasons ago, where he had to play significant reps, and he's never going to get the credit he probably deserves for this season. There's still a lot of people on social media that say he's going to be the downfall. He takes bad angles. Matt and I have talked about this. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer took bad angles last year too. It happens in a football game.
Took bad angles in their prime.
Yeah. So, it's just been from top to bottom. A lot of these guys getting mixed in. Greg Rousseau continues his ascension. 3 QB hits. He gets the fumble recovery, a sack. If he can continue doing this at the rest of the regular season and actually show up in the playoffs, that's been the biggest thing with this team. Come playoff time, the pass rush has been non-existent, but I feel like there's even more hope for that this season too, because they've been winning with their front four. They haven't had to blitz early and often to generate that pressure. That's still something they can do from time to time, but both sides of the ball should give you a lot of confidence come January.
That is actually, I'm going to go off to a side tangent here, because what you just brought up with Damar Hamlin, I think I just have a thought on it that I think could help quell some people's discontent with some of these spots. Like, we talked about it a little bit earlier with the Rachel Bush question. And it's like, I think a lot of people want NFL teams in general, to be put together like you're putting together a Madden team, right? Like, go out and get the best player at every single position. Like, go out and get Max Crosby, go out and get Fred Warner, go out and get Kyle Hamilton, go out and get Jalen Ramsey, and put them all on the team. And like, that's what you should be trying to do. Accumulate as many like elite players as you can. The reality of team sports, specifically the NFL, it's not an attainable goal. Like, you're not going to be able to, with the salary cap, position all of these different, players, especially elite level players that are making 10, 15, $20 million a season. You're going to have to fit in certain guys that don't necessarily fit into that part of things. And to a lesser degree, this also applies to the Sean McDermott conversation, which I was just having with my uncle. I should bring my uncle on. We should do an episode with him. He's in my texts like all the time. My Uncle Steve. He is not a McDermott fan. And so he's always kind of talked about, like, would love a Kyle Shanahan. And so I kind of like poke and prod him, because in my job now, it's kind of fun to do that. And I was like, oh man, I wonder if Kyle Shanahan's going to have a job this offseason. Just to give him a hard time. He's not going to get fired. But so we go back and forth with it. And my pushback to him isn't that we shouldn't be critical of Sean McDermott or be wanting more in big moments. That is going to be the test when we get to the playoffs. My pushback is always, what are these alternatives that you think you're going to acquire Bill Belichick or Tony Dungy or some phenomenal Hall of Fame level coach that's going to come in here and do it better? Like, of course, if you have that plan figured out, sign me up, right? Like, out with Sean McDermott and bring in the guy. Like, I know Bill Belichick's out there, but I also am very like down on the idea of Bill Belichick at 70 years old, a year in media, coming back and all of a sudden being able to build a culture and build a program. Like, I don't think that that's going to necessarily work the way people think that it will. And if you look across the scope of the league, sure, Ben Johnson is a really intriguing young candidate. But what if it goes like Shane Steichen went in Indianapolis and they picked the wrong? Well, it's different because you wouldn't be picking the quarterback. The quarterback's here. But I just think there's so many variables that have to line up for it to work. And I think at the very least, what you have in Sean is a guy that's going to find a way to have a top level defense. And that combined with the best quarterback in the NFL, arguably, eventually will get you over the hump. And I use the Peyton Manning example all the time. I think it's the one that you have to cling to if you're the Bills fan. But where are you at, Kyle, while you're on here? I'm throwing another thing at you. Where are you at in the Sean McDermott approval rating?
I mean, as much as I want to criticize McDermott for some of the things that have happened, in the playoff losses, like, I don't know. I still think you have to give him credit for righting the ship and recognizing when certain things have to change. I think McDermott's done a good job, at least certain off seasons, of picking maybe one or two things and trying to get better at them. I think you saw that with the addition of the gentleman they brought in to help from his name is escaping me right now, but the gentleman who's doing the former NFL referee,
John Perry.
John Perry, exactly. That John Perry to come in and help with the replays. We know McDermott's had a historically not so great challenge record, but that was something he identified in the offseason and realized he needed help to do that. And also, trusting two younger, offensive defensive coordinators kind of take the reins here. From when McDermott first came in, we saw him kind of go to like the Rick Dennisons of the world and some of the older heads that kind of had more experience. But I think now that McDermott's kind of been able to get his program to where he wants it, and he's able to kind of home grow some of this talent, releasing that control, which has been something that, he's kind of been dinged for here. I think him being able to do that in small increments and see this value that's come from it. I think him leaning more into that, as we've seen throughout the season, I'm giving him the credit right now. But at the same time, like, there are probably things that he still does need to work on a bit. I think it's a little bit of both, but I do think McDermott needs some of that praise when he's earned it. And, I don't want to just be a detractor for the sake of being a detractor.
So you're not unlike my uncle. No, I'm just kidding. So but you can reserve the right to criticize, just like I and Ryan are going to criticize if things go off the rails. Like, everything's, great right now, but if there's another epic playoff blunder, like, that is going to eventually become, there's going to be a point of no return, and there's going to have to come a time where you prioritize the last bit of prime that Josh Allen has left. But when you do make that decision, Ryan, you have to make it in a way that is betting on somebody that's going to come in here and not be a mistake.
Yeah, and that's certainly fair. And, for every Sean McVay, that young, talented guy that's come in, wins the Super Bowl, there's been so many others that have just not been able to either get to that big game or has sputtered out. You look at Mike McDaniel now in Miami. It was a brilliant hire. They're geniuses. Look at the speed, look at the track team they've built up. And now there's a ton of Dolphins fans calling for the heads of players like that. There's reasons why teams hold on to their head coaches, like a Mike Tomlin, who has not won a Super Bowl in a long time, but he has his team in the mix, even when there's years where the talent is down. John Harbaugh with Baltimore, same thing. It's been a long time since they've won a Super Bowl or made it, a great run in the postseason. That's not to say you just hold on to guys to hold on to them, but Sean McDermott has earned that right to continue to coach here because of the success he's had, taking a franchise that was one of the lowest of the lows with this when he first came on, and now they're viewed as one of these elite teams. Players want to come here once again, and only one team hoists the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year. It's very hard to do, especially when you have elite coaches like Andy Reid, who, by the way, it took a long time for him to win his first Super Bowl. And now he's had that long line of success. It took him a whole, and second franchise after turning around the Eagles for quite some time. He goes to KC and finally gets the job done. So you don't just give up on guys who have established a culture, who are well-liked within the locker room, have earned the respect of guys on both sides of the ball. I'm right there with you. If there's a blunder again come playoff time, if they're too conservative and he goes away from the aggressiveness that we've seen in the regular season, I'll be the first to criticize him. I do feel like, though, he has grown year in and year out.
This has been great stuff, Kyle. Thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome.
Very awesome. And speaking of awesome, head over to Tops right now, and you could take part in the Christmas bonus program. Shop at Tops and save $10 at all your other favorite stores and restaurants. With over 25 gift cards to choose from, there's something for everyone on your list. And don't forget to treat yourself to some extra savings too. Be Santa's biggest little helper with Christmas bonus from Tops. And for a complete list of available gift card savings, visit topsmarkets.com/Christmas bonus. All right, I'm working on an episode for tomorrow. We'll be back with the Staples Show on Wednesday as well. We'll have at least 2, maybe 3 more this week. Kyle, thank you so much. See you all soon.